The chamber was cloaked in silence, the kind that presses down on every shoulder, making each breath feel heavy. Marble walls echoed the shuffle of papers, the scrape of polished shoes against the floor, and the low hum of power that always seemed to radiate from the bench where Chief Justice John Roberts presided. All eyes were fixed on him as he leaned forward, gaze sharp, voice carrying the authority of an institution centuries old. "Representative Crockett," he began, his tone laced with the faintest smirk, "perhaps this matter is too complex for someone without deeper judicial experience." The words, dressed as courtesy, landed like daggers. It was not merely a remark. It was a challenge, a dismissal, a reminder of hierarchy. The room shifted, an almost imperceptible murmur of approval from his allies, the kind that said the old guard still knew how to put someone in their place. Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. She didn't rush to fill the silence, didn't scramble to defend herself. Instead, she let the moment hang in the air, her eyes steady, her posture unbroken. The pause became louder than any words could have been. 1 second, then 2. By the third, the chamber itself seemed to realize that silence had shifted sides. For the first time, Robert's confidence flickered. His chin tilted upward, his lips tightened, waiting for her to stumble, to explain, to shrink. But she didn't. Crockett's stillness was defiance, her quiet an indictment of every patronizing syllable that had left his mouth. Observers leaned forward. A young clerk clutched a pen so tightly it snapped between her fingers. Somewhere in the gallery a reporter whispered, "She's not taking the bait." The Chief Justice, wrapped in the weight of tradition, had expected obedience. Instead, he was met with composure so unyielding it unsettled even him. Then came the whisper in every head, unspoken yet undeniable. The Chief Justice thought stone and wood. It was a stage where the story of America was being written in real time. Each exchange carried the weight of history, and this particular hearing was no exception. At its heart lay questions that would ripple far beyond the chamber walls. Questions about dignity, representation, and whether power in America truly belonged to the people, or only to the few who had long claimed it as their inheritance. For decades, hearings like this had been predictable affairs. The powerful would speak, the rest would defer, and the cycle of intimidation would go unchallenged. It was a language everyone in the establishment understood. Arrogance disguised as authority, sharp words wrapped in legalese, designed to remind the uninitiated of their supposed place. But this time was different, because seated at the table was someone who did not carry the weight of deference on her shoulders. Jasmine Crockett represented something that the polished wood and marble could never contain. The voice of people who had been told, again and again, to be quiet. The tension mattered because this wasn't only about Roberts testing her. It was about a system testing whether America still had space for leaders who didn't come prepackaged from the country club or the Ivy League circuit. The Chief Justice's smirk wasn't just his own. It symbolized every condescending glance that working people, immigrants, and outsiders had endured when daring to step into halls of power. His words were meant to shrink her, and by extension, to shrink them. But Crockett's very presence rejected that script. She was not polished marble. She was forged steel, sharpened by life outside of privilege, strengthened by struggles that could not be intimidated away. And for the millions watching, she became more than a congresswoman. She became a mirror reflecting back their own battles with arrogance that tried into the marble chambers where his voice now echoed, but he had always seemed destined for them. From his earliest days in law school, professors whispered that he was the kind of student institutions adored, precise, detached, brilliant in a way that impressed those who prized order over passion. He moved through the ranks with calculated ease, each step a testament to discipline and ambition. By the time he reached the Supreme Court, Roberts had mastered not only the law, but the art of cloaking power and civility. He built a career on the image of balance, presenting himself as the careful guardian of legal precedent. To the public, he was often described as calm, reasonable, the man who could temper the court's extremes. But beneath that polished exterior lay something far less noble. His decisions, while dressed in the language of neutrality, often tipped in favor of those already in power. Corporate interests flourished, voting rights weakened, and accountability for the privileged remained elusive. His cold detachment was not simply temperament, it was armor, designed to keep him untouched by the realities of those whose lives his rulings reshaped. For years, this strategy worked. His voice carried the weight of inevitability, and few dared to question him directly. Colleagues marveled at his intellect, his ability to dismantle an argument with a single phrase, his refusal to be rattled. To them, he was untouchable, the embodiment of establishment authority, a jurist who could glide through storms without ever appearing wet. To the outside world, he projected dignity. Yet to those who listened closely, there was always a trace of condescension, a certainty that his perspective was above reproach. The irony was that Roberts believed this distance made him fair. He saw himself as standing above the fray, immune to passion, immune to bias. But in truth, that very distance disconnected him from the struggles that animated the nation. Did not begin in marbled chambers or echoing halls of prestige. It began in neighborhoods where dreams had to fight to survive, where dignity was not granted but demanded through grit and resilience. She grew up watching ordinary people confront extraordinary challenges. Families working 2 jobs to make ends meet, neighbors pooling resources to cover medical bills, communities carrying one another when institutions looked away. Those early lessons carved into her the belief that service wasn't optional. It was survival, and it was sacred. From an early age, Crockett understood that her path would never be easy. She was a young black woman stepping into arenas that were never built for her to enter, let alone thrive. But instead of retreating, she leaned into the challenge. Books became her refuge, the law her weapon. She studied relentlessly, driven not by the pursuit of status, but by the knowledge that mastering the language of the powerful was the only way to defend those left unheard. Law school was a crucible. Surrounded by peers who carried the quiet confidence of generational privilege, Crockett carried something else entirely. Determination rooted in sacrifice. While others debated legal theory as an abstract game, she treated every case study as if it were the story of someone in her own community. For her, the law was never about academic applause. It was about real people with real stakes. Her professors recognized her brilliance, but more than that, they saw a student who refused to be detached. She wasn't just learning doctrine, she was preparing for battle. Her early career proved that truth. Crockett didn't seek cushy positions in law firms that catered to corporations. She stepped into public defense, choosing to represent those society broke as Roberts leaned in. His tone sharper now, the polished civility giving way to a harder edge. He began with questions wrapped in legal jargon, the kind designed to box an opponent into a corner. "Representative Crockett," he said, his words rolling with practiced ease. "If you believe your interpretation is valid, then surely you can reconcile it with the precedents set forth in Citizens United and subsequent rulings. Or is it that such complexities lie beyond the reach of your experience?" It was a trap, classic Roberts. Cite precedent, layer the question with implication, then sit back and watch the other side trip over themselves. Many before her had wilted under that gaze, fumbling through answers while the Chief Justice's reputation loomed overhead like a gavel suspended midair. But Crockett didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly, eyes steady, her response calm and precise. Precedent, Chief Justice, doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists within the Constitution itself. And the Constitution does not bend to privilege, no matter how many times it is reinterpreted to suit the powerful. A murmur rippled through the room. It wasn't defiance for its own sake. It was measured, exact, a reminder that she knew the terrain as well as he did. Roberts pressed harder. He shifted tactics, weaving questions meant to expose inconsistency. He spoke of legislative overreach, judicial restraint, the supposed dangers of activism from the bench. Each phrase was laced with insinuation. That she was reckless, uninformed, out of her depth. Yet with each attempt, Crockett answered not with fire but with control. Her voice never rose, her words never scattered. She was deliberate, each reply a stitch tightening the thread of composure that held her together. The tension thickened. Every time Roberts asked, the chamber leaned forward. Roberts' last jab was heavy, charged with the kind of expectancy that only comes before a break in the storm. The Chief Justice had leaned forward, voice cutting, his words sharp enough to draw blood. "Your pauses, Representative, suggest hesitation. Perhaps the complexities of constitutional law, are better left to those who've devoted their lives to it. For the briefest moment, Crockett said nothing. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded, her gaze locked on him. The silence grew uncomfortable. To Roberts, it looked like triumph. To the crowd, it looked like collapse. But to Jasmine Crockett, it was strategy. She drew a breath, slow and deliberate, before leaning toward the microphone. Her voice, when it finally came, was steady and unhurried. A calm wave breaking against the jagged rocks of Roberts' aggression. "Chief Justice," she began, "it's interesting that you confuse patience with weakness. In my community, silence is not surrender. Silence is preparation." The chamber stirred. A few heads turned. This wasn't the defensive reply Roberts had expected. Crockett continued, her tone precise but layered with a rising energy. "You speak of constitutional complexities as though they belong to you, as though ordinary Americans cannot grasp them. But the truth is, the Constitution was not written for a bench. It was written for a people. It belongs to all of us, not just the privileged few who interpret it from polished chambers far removed from everyday struggle." Her words echoed, striking at the core of the accusation. Roberts had painted her as unqualified. She reframed the entire premise. The Constitution is not the property of the elite. It is the birthright of the people. Now she pressed forward, no longer just answering, but dismantling. "Odette, our democracy with M.O. You mentioned Citizens United, still buzzing, but outside its walls, the real aftershocks had already begun. In an era where every exchange can be clipped, remixed, and broadcast worldwide within minutes, Jasmine Crockett's mic drop was no longer confined to marble columns and polished floors. It was a spark, and the world was gasoline. Within 20 minutes, the first clip hit Twitter. A shaky phone recording, captioned with nothing more than "Fire she did that fire." By the end of the hour, it had 5 million views. By nightfall, it had been shared across TikTok, Instagram Reels, and even late-night television. The hashtags ignited. Hashtag Crockett crushes Roberts. Hashtag Justice is truth. Hashtag mic drop moment. Trending lists filled with her name. Side-by-side memes exploded across feeds. On one side, Roberts adjusting his papers with a scowl. On the other, Crockett leaning into the microphone, eyes blazing with calm authority. Captions screamed the verdict. David versus Goliath. Guess who won? Journalists scrambled to contextualize what had just unfolded. Op-eds hit digital presses in rapid succession. One headline read, "Roberts meets his match. How Representative Crockett redefined constitutional debate." Another, "From silence to strength. Crockett's lesson in patience and power." Cable news networks looped the clip endlessly, panels dissecting every word, every pause, every flicker of Roberts' tightened jaw. Progressive commentators hailed her as a truth-teller who refused to be cowed by the weight of robes and history. Even centrist analysts admitted it was a rare moment of clarity, a reminder that authority could be challenged, and not just with deference, but with defiance rooted in principle. But the real story wasn't in the polished studio debates. It was in the raw voices of ordinary people. On Facebook, a single mother in Ohio wrote, "I've never cared much for politics, but tonight I cried. For once, someone said what I've always felt. That justice isn't about intimidation. It's about truth." When the trending hashtags began to slow and the pundits moved on to their next story, one truth remained. Jasmine Crockett had done more than win an argument. She had shifted the frame of what power looked like in America. Because in that moment, when the Chief Justice of the United States tried to bend her under the weight of his robe and his title, she showed the nation that dignity, courage, and brilliance could dismantle intimidation. It wasn't just about Roberts. It wasn't even about her. It was about the principle that no institution, no figure, no matter how grand, no matter how long they've held the gavel, could silence someone armed with truth. And Crockett understood the importance of that lesson. She didn't storm, she didn't shout, she didn't crumble. She leaned into the very tools that history has always given to those dismissed, underestimated, or overlooked: clarity, calm, and conviction. She reminded us that power is not a posture. Power is the courage to speak when you are expected to stay quiet, and to stay steady when you are expected to tremble. That is why her words struck so deeply. Because for millions of ordinary people watching, This wasn't a spectacle, it was recognition. They saw their own lives in her stand. The single mother confronting a landlord. The immigrant worker arguing for fair pay. The student raising her hand in a classroom where no one believed she belonged. The whistleblower who risks everything to expose corruption. Each of them had felt the pressure of intimidation. Each of them had been told, in one way or another, sit down, stay quiet, know your place. And yet, Crockett proved the opposite, that brilliance and dignity can belong to anyone bold enough to claim them. That justice is not a private club reserved for the robed and the wealthy. That it belongs fundamentally to the people. Her clash with Roberts was not just a takedown. It was a blueprint. The title of this story promised a clash. Judge John Roberts tried to intimidate Jasmine Crockett, but discovered she was a legal genius. And that is exactly what unfolded. What began as an attempt to silence her became a stage where her brilliance and composure dismantled arrogance in real time. But the deeper truth is this. It wasn't just about one justice or one representative. It was about what wins in the end. Titles fade, intimidation falters, but dignity and truth? They endure. Crockett's calm strength proved a lesson that transcends politics. When you lead with clarity and courage, you can stand firm against even the tallest walls of power. That's why her moment resonated so deeply. It wasn't theater, it was a reminder. A reminder that justice belongs to the people, and that the underdog's voice still carries weight when spoken with conviction. And here's where you come in. If this story moved you, if it gave you a spark of validation, hope, or fire, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Pass it along. Let it ripple outward, because the more people see examples of courage standing up to arrogance, the more they'll believe they can do the same. And if you want more stories like this, where power is challenged, where truth breaks through, where the underdog gets the spotlight, make sure you subscribe. Join this community. Add your voice to ours. Because together, we're building more than just a channel. We're building a reminder that justice, dignity, and courage are never out of style. And that's why this stand, this moment, will be remembered long after the headlines fade.